This video is sponsored by Curology. You know, I'm not sure what kind of YouTube label I fall under. Am I a productivity YouTuber? I mean, all of my friends are, but I've sort of been feeling mediocre about that label because the last 7 months have felt like some of the least productive months of my life, at least in terms of focus and deep work. I mean, things like filming and making sketches and stuff like that. I suppose I've been doing that more than ever, but I've realized that slowly but surely I have developed a really strong addiction for social media, and in that sense, it had really hindered my ability to focus. I recently read through a couple of books on improving focus and actually took inspiration when I had met up with Thomas Frank and watched a video of his on how to improve your focus, and realized this is something I should go back to basics on in order to feel more good about my work. And above all else, I began to view attention as the most important ingredient, that if I can add to my life more substantially, then I would feel more productive, more happy, and more creative. When we invest our limited attention intelligently and deliberately, we can think more clearly and feel as if we're moving the needle more in our day. So over the last week, I actually reread the book Deep Work by Cal Newport and actually made my way through this book, How to Hyperfocus, as well as a couple of other books. And here are 7 strong ideas that I came across in those books that I've been using and benefiting from in just a handful of days. The first is to put your phone out of sight when you're working, ideally for at least a couple hours. I first began practicing this technique of not looking at my phone when I was making a video on living like Christopher Nolan for a week. Christopher Nolan just doesn't have a smartphone every time he needs to make a call or talk to someone. He says he's always by someone who has a phone, so he himself doesn't need one, and not having a phone allows him to have more quiet space in between tasks. Something that I noticed that would creep up in my life with me checking my phone more than needed was because in my day job there's a lot of meetings, a lot of meetings where I just have to be there, but it's not really that important for me to be there. So while these meetings would be taking place, I would just look at my phone to get more stimulation to see what's been up, as opposed to listening in on this minutia in corporate life. But when your mind is even slightly resisting a task, it will look for more novel things to focus on. And our cell phones are a great example. They provide an endless stream of bite-sized, delicious information for our brains to consume. And so now what I've started doing is when I need to do my most important task of the day, which for me is writing, really getting back into writing, I've been leaving my phone in the living room while I work here, or just have it out of sight and out of mind for a handful of hours. And when the distraction isn't in front of you, even if it's just 2 hours, you'll find yourself just getting a lot more done. The second thing is meditation. Practices like meditation and mindfulness are important because they train you to practice holding a single intention for your mind for a duration of time. And even 15 minutes of meditation in the morning, especially if I manage to fit it in after a workout, makes me much more accepting of boredom and willing to just do the work in front of me. Of course, these points are nothing novel, nothing new, and you might have heard them before, but I wanted to start with the basics. The third point here is a little more etheric and one that I really enjoyed, and it's an idea I actually got from reading Theodore Roosevelt's biography written by Edmund Morris. And I've said this before, but the story of Theodore Roosevelt is one that I find pretty inspiring because he was a youth with a lot of health problems, and the doctor had told him that he should not be athletic, and he basically had revolted against what his doctor told him to become like a professor, and instead would just go for long hikes and practice boxing and weightlifting. Basically doing everything he'd been told wasn't good for him because of his heart conditions. But Theodore Roosevelt also had a mindset in which he used sheer intensity to get his work done much faster than his peers or his siblings, even though he was often distracted by so many other interests. Theodore Roosevelt, like me growing up, he was interested in a lot of extracurricular activities. He loved being a socialite. In Edmund Morris's book, it was said that his attention was hopelessly scattered between an amazing array of interests, like boxing, wrestling, bodybuilding, dance lessons, poetry readings, and a lifelong obsession with just nature. And so to support how much extracurricular stuff he had going on and his prolific social life, he had a rule about his work. He would consider his studying day to be between 8:30 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. And during the day, he would have classes and recitation and lunch and athletic training. But the fragments that were in between his classes and his lunch and his training, he would consider that study time. And it was said that in that time, he would study at a feverish intensity. He would often get things like headaches, but he wouldn't let that stop him from just really hammering his work in. And that meant he only spent about a quarter of his week studying. Compared to other students, it was much less, but the intensity of his study was pretty incredible. And so strategy number 3 for increasing your focus is to artificially invoke a sense of intensity in your work. Some Rooseveltian intensity. Now, Roosevelt wasn't like a top student, but he got through all his work and he did decently well in his classes just through sheer intensity. In particular, you can identify a deep task that's high on your priority list and estimate how long you'd normally put aside for an obligation of this type. And then you give yourself a hard deadline that drastically reduces this time. If possible, it's even helpful to publicly commit to the deadline. And if you do this, if you actually set fake parameters on yourself to get a certain amount of work done, then you'll find that your intensity naturally increases. And with that, your focus. I'm actually trying to implement this over the next 2 months. I'm trying to run an experiment in which I upload YouTube videos a lot more. I think it's probably been around 6 months now where I've just been a little creatively stuck because I want my videos to be so good. I often don't even start writing or filming because I just don't know what to film. And I can reflect back on the earlier days of my channel where I wasn't really weighted by needing to make a quality video. So I would just upload twice a week. And every time I would upload, generally speaking, know that it's not super high quality, but I would push through anyway. I would have a sense of accomplishment at hitting my deadline. And then looking back at some of those videos over the last 2 years, I realized that a lot of them were actually pretty good in hindsight. At the time of uploading, they weren't good, but in hindsight, they were good because I had an unusual pressure I put on myself. As a result of that, more intensity and more focus. So adding parameters and a sense of fake intensity could be a great way to increase your focus. Before continuing, I have to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of today's video, Curology. Now, Curology is a skincare system, and over the last 2 years, many skincare companies have reached out to me to do an integration, and most of the time I've said no. But the reason I was kind of intrigued by Curology is because they have a customized formula that you get by simply going on their site, answering a few questions, you take a few selfies of yourself, and then a dermatology provider actually lines you up with the formula that they think would be best for you. And what I found cool about Curology is that they have like proven active ingredients. One of the ingredients in my custom formula is tretinoin. And if you've ever seen the channel More Plates, More Dates, Derek on there, he speaks about the benefits of tretinoin. There's been a lot of science to back up the fact that tretinoin actually has anti-aging effects. And since Derek from More Plates, More Dates has sort of advocated the benefits of tretinoin, I've been happy that I got on a skincare regime of my own through Curology. My formula also has niacinamide in it, and that's because people with like South Asian skin have a propensity for dark spots, especially like if you get a pimple, you break it or whatever, you get rid of your pimple, it tends to leave like a little mark afterwards, and it can actually last up to months. And an ingredient like niacinamide actually helps kind of lighten up that skin, just get rid of like those dark spots. The takeaway here is that these ingredients are active. There's like research to back up that they work, and they're tailored to your skin. You can click the link in the description box and you'll actually get your first bottle for free. You just have to pay $4.95 for shipping and handling. So thank you, Curology, for sponsoring this video, and thank you all for watching. Point number 4 is to continually practice hyperfocus. The book on hyperfocus says this: the ability to concentrate intensely is a skill that must be trained. This idea might sound obvious once it's pointed out, but it represents a departure from how people understand such matters. One can potentially consider a habit like building your focus, building your concentration, like flossing. You tend to not do it at first, but when you build up the habit slowly, then it just ends up being something you do. And that's a point that I'm trying to get to with my writing, where I just get up, I drink my coffee, and then I just start writing and get to a place where I enter flow before I even go on to doing other things like going to the gym or getting going with my day job. The practice of focusing, maybe at first, even if it's just an hour or 2 hours, what it does is strengthen that mental muscle. Idea number 5 is to delete your social media apps. In retrospect, this seems like an obvious thing. I know a bunch of Matt D'Avella videos in which he says that after he posts on Instagram, he just deletes the app. Tim Ferriss said the same thing as well, but it's only been in this last week that I've been trying this of once I post, I delete the app. And in the past, I would justify the fact that I had things like YouTube Studio and the analytics of it, or Instagram on my mobile screen, and I would be checking it all the time because I wanted to engage with my community. But I realized that if I need to post something, I can download the app, post it, then delete it, and then schedule a time where I do things like go through the comments and respond to them or heart them, and get my social media intake and engagement. But for the rest of the day, I can just delete the app again. And it's when it's not there, my attention naturally increases, my focus naturally gravitates to the things I should be working on. Number 6 is a point called scratching. It's actually an idea that I came across from a book called The Creative Habit, which I'd read before, but I went back in and reread it and got several new nuggets to use. And this idea of scratching is that When you're trying to be creative, when you're trying to do something like writing or even solve a complex problem at work, you often are waiting for the ideas to hit you, the solution to hit you, and you're waiting for that thunderbolt to get the thing going. Or when it comes to things like deep focus, you're waiting to get into flow state. But what scratching is where if you're stuck, you use small signals to get yourself going. So for instance, if I'm trying to come up with a video topic, or I'm working with my videographer Thomas on teasing out the jokes in a sketch or a scene we're shooting, what I might often do is play a song or a movie scene and then listen to that soundtrack to kind of get the juices flowing. Or if that doesn't work, I'll start reading a book. Even if it's a book that I'd read earlier, I'll scan that book for ideas and see how it might invoke something in me. When you're in scratching mode, the tiniest microcell of an idea will get you going. Musicians know this because compositions rarely come to them whole and complete. They call their morsels of inspiration lines or riffs or hooks or licks. That's what this author in Creative Habit is talking about, where you're just looking for a way to get in, a way to get past the blank page, or to start working at your problem. So if you're starting to cultivate your focus on some task and you're having a hard time getting going, ask yourself for the smallest barrier of entry into that task, and you might find you'll be able to get going. And there's a number of things you can do to scratch more. Reading, of course, is an obvious one. You could also just call someone up and engage in a conversation with them and take notes on that conversation. Ali Abdaal does this. In fact, when I'd done like a Zoom call with a couple of productivity YouTubers, afterwards, Ali Abdaal had done a Twitter post because he had been taking notes on that whole conversation. And in that moment, I found it kind of excessive. Like, whoa, why did you take notes on this conversation? But all the points he extracted from it were so useful. And I think one of the reasons he's so full of useful ideas is because he's constantly just getting input and processing that input by writing about it. Another example that the book mentions is Paul McCartney and how he came up with the song 8 Days a Week. He was in a taxi and he was just getting a conversation going with his chauffeur, and he said, "How have things been going?" And then the chauffeur said, "Working hard, you know, working 8 days a week." And he had never heard that phrase before, so he took that back to John Lennon and they started having a conversation about it, and then John Lennon just on the spot started coming up with a tune for 8 days a week. So that's point number 6, looking for inputs or small ways in through the process of scratching. And the last idea is this: pick one highlight for your day and just get going on that one highlight. When you have a long to-do list and you're thinking about your checklist, it can be overwhelming and you may be inclined to not focus, to procrastinate, but something magical happens when you just decide that there's only one highlight of your day, there's only one thing you need to do that day. And so if you draw attention to that one big focal point to complete that day, then once you do that task, no matter when it is, even if you had a slow start in your day, once you accomplish that one highlight of the day, you feel extra motivated to keep moving forward with other things. Each day's goal is ambitious, but it's just one thing. This is also something that I've been applying to the director series, where making one of those videos, such as coming up with the storyboards or the script, or the concept. Someone in the comments on the most recent one left me this compliment that I loved. It said, like, these director series videos are like a combination between Christopher Nolan and a meme generator. But coming up with those videos is so daunting, and so one thing that's helpful is just coming up with one highlight of the day. Just go to this location and shoot this one thing. And with these videos, now that we've made 7 of them, when you keep stacking one thing on top of the next, then you find yourself making a dope-ass video. This focal point creates clarity and motivation, and when you have one ambitious but achievable goal at the end of the day, you're done. You can go home satisfied. So these are the 7 ideas that have been helpful for me, that I've been using more this week to great effect. Putting your phone out of sight, meditating, faking insane intensity, and setting aggressive deadline parameters. Continually practicing hyperfocus, just doing a little bit of it day in and day out to build that habit like flossing. Scratching out new ideas or ways into deep work through things like reading or conversation or music. And lastly, setting a highlight for the day. That's it for today's video. Greatness is coming. I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.